going back to the early days when we, there was the Ford Foundation grant on the San Diego studies, coastal plain studies, and so forth. We were very involved in that.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about that? I've come across it. To me, that strikes me as maybe a pivotal point in the beginning.
It is, because it really was the how we were able to get the funding for the graduate program. And a lot of that emerged from John had made contact with people in San Diego and saw opportunities to do some very interesting studies on the coastal lagoons of San Diego because they're ecologically they're critical, but people didn't really know how to deal with them. And
why? Why are they critical?
Well, because they were areas that were relatively easy to develop, but they would be obliterated. Their whole ecosystem would be obliterated if people really understood how coastal flooding worked in those lagoons and the importance of those estuaries to the whole food chain of oceans and so forth.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, John got into that, and then working with another person, Art Jokola.
Yeah.
Art at the time was an administrator for San Diego, and very good grants person, and found some funding to make this happen. And so it was really through Art Jokola and John getting the funding for these things together, and then we were able to hire some graduate students who became the core of the graduate program in landscape architecture. In fact, that was in those first years we had all of our students on research assistants. The thing that will prevail, regardless of the politics of it and so forth, is the fundamental truth of ecosystem design. One, we were dealing with some ecosystems that really needed some careful caring, and there were real opportunities to do what we were calling ecosystem-based design.
Yeah.
And that became the basis for the graduate program.
Right. You said the fundamental truth of ecosystem design.
Yeah.
How would you describe that?
I think just I think most people, well, it's not everybody, but the fundamental truth of rehabilitating nature and sustaining nature and working with all of these principles on the wall, there's something to that makes ethical basis, ecological basis, and those prevail all sorts of groups of people, various cultures, various religions.
Yeah.
And if you go back into archaeology, you can see evidence of this for centuries.
Yeah.
And that's basically how we've survived.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, we even today with what is imminent in terms of climate change and those kinds of things. There's a lot of people that I think are rallying around this and understanding that the fundamental truths. It isn't a political issue. It isn't an economic issue. Although actually you would hope that you can get a coalescence of people behind this idea and move it forward. And you'd hope that what people think is makes economic sense also makes ecological sense. To get all those things clustered, but those are the fundamental truths that I think prevail, and I think more and more people are becoming aware of that.
I also know you have ideas about wanting to connect local, but also how to reach an audience beyond the local.
Well, I think that's the big opportunity we have with social media and communications the way they are. I think if people really were to latch onto that, we could we could create some of that.
Yeah.
I put together a kind of a draft proposal of what might become a documentary on what John did, and I'm thinking something like that could form a critical mass to get to a larger audience, because it isn't sort of, unfortunately, regenerative studies can get marginalized.
Yeah.
And what we really need to do is to get all of these things to be mainstream in terms of, how people are thinking, what food they're putting on their table, how they're interacting with their environment, what transportation choices do they make in terms of fuel efficiency and economics, just how they live, in terms of having a room like this, which is passive solar, and although I think you've got a lot of daylight on it here, but anyway, I understand you need that.
It's fun to call it.
But all of these choices that people make every day, I think need to become not regenerative studies, but a way of life, a regenerative lifestyle, which is, again, I hate to call it a lifestyle because that again marginalizes it, but regenerative living. And I think that's where we really have to make fundamental choices.
I guess what I'm thinking of too is like I went to this place that it was all about, that they were sort of leading technology, and they're really interested in being environmentally conscious, and so they have this sample homes where you go in and the lights turn on when you walk in and only a little bit, and very environmentally in tune, and it was exciting in a lot of ways, and felt like you were walking into the future. But I also felt completely disconnected from nature. And
well,
that's
I think
I'm
that would
curious
be
about.
the question. I mean, here you're all focused on modulating the lights, but if you were in a daylit room and you didn't need the lights.
But even the idea of participating, I think one thing that's been nice about being here at the center, and it's sort of maybe what you're talking about with community versus some forms of community agriculture, supported agriculture, where people are going to pick up from a local place, is that's a nice thing, because when you come here, you feel connected to nature. You feel even the room, the temperature, just being, it feels so connected. And I feel like a lot of stuff that's heading towards sustainability is disconnected from nature. And I guess I'm curious if the value system of connecting physically sort of to nature is being lost in some of the ideas about sustainability.
Well, I think that's at the core of it, and it becomes kind of an awareness that people have, and I think it'll be interesting to see how people assimilate a lot of this. But I think fundamentally, people can make individual choices about what food they eat, what water they drink, and so forth. And that can be very connected to nature, and can be a way of regenerating people's interest and survival, really. And so that's at the core of it.
Yeah, I hope so. To me, that's sort of the magic. That's like there's sort of the spiritual magic part. The soul or something of it.
I very much agree.
That's
what we need to be talking about. And I think the center could be the places where we get that message across.
I think it has a little magic.
I really agree.